Thank you very much. It's good to see everybody. So I'm not going to talk about boats because I've only been in boats for 3 weeks. But my name is Spencer Scott. I've been in classifieds and marketplace companies for 20 years. I've come to a lot of these conferences, so when I was thinking about what to talk about today, I thought about what I would want to hear. Now, granted, I'm a revenue person, but I imagine most of you care about revenue. So I wanted to talk about monetization and growing revenue. So before boats, I liked the transition question from the last panelist. I was at CarGurus. I was at CarGurus for 4 years. I essentially ran the North American business, and I was fortunate during that time. We grew revenue from about $500 million to over $1 billion. So I've certainly seen marketplaces and classified companies scale significantly. So I want to talk about improving monetization in uncertain times. And we all feel that. You know, there was a COVID reference earlier. There's a lot of things happening in the economy with interest rates. But I'm not necessarily talking about the uncertainty we face. I want to dig into the uncertainty that our customers face, because that ultimately is the biggest challenge that your salespeople are facing today, is the customer not knowing what's going to happen even in the near term, which they had much more visibility over the near term just 2-3 years ago. So it's much harder to sell into this environment. So what can we do to improve monetization? Now, for some context, I spend at least 1 hour a month talking to one of my peers in the marketplace or classified space. So some of the answers, some of the anecdotes you'll hear today are certainly how we grew such a large dealer base at CarGurus, some of the things we're applying to the marine space at boats right now, but most of it I have borrowed or stolen from one of my peers who have spent a lot more time in the marketplace space than I have. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers you should know, and then we're going to talk about the three key drivers of monetization in most of our businesses. That's churn, expansion, and new sales. So numbers that you should know. Often in talking to my peers, I'm surprised how different companies view these numbers and how often revenue leaders don't know these 3 numbers. And maybe all of you do, and I hope you do. But if you're looking at just the general health of your business to start, you should understand your net dollar retention. Now, often I will talk to a marketplace or a classifieds company or a company in general, and they will tell me that they're growing revenue. And growing revenue is fantastic, but if you don't have positive net dollar retention, you're not growing revenue in a healthy way. So you really need to take a snapshot of your current customer base at some period of time, usually greater than a quarter, and see if that base of customers has grown or it has shrank. And I've worked for marketplaces where revenue has been growing and where revenue has been shrinking against that number. But most of the marketplaces I worked for, net dollar retention was actually less than 100%. So we were selling hundreds of millions of dollars in new business, but that new business was being offset by the negative balance of churn and expansion. So you're just filling a leaky bucket. So you could be growing much faster, and you need to focus on net dollar retention, and we'll talk a minute about how to do that. The next kind of thing, you get away from net dollar retention and you're looking at how are you growing your business, right? Whether you're a CEO or a revenue leader or you're in marketing or whatever department, you want to know, is your business growing in a healthy way? One of the easiest ways to look at that is take the cost, all of your sales and marketing cost. So that's all of the marketing budget and all of the fully loaded sales cost. So your fully loaded sales team, including insurance, all of the things that you have to do to pay that sales team, and FP&A can give you that number, and then you divide it by the revenue growth over that same period of time. So again, look for something more than a quarter, just go back the last 6 months, go to FP&A and say, how much did we spend on sales and marketing over the last 6 months, and divide it by how much your revenue grew over that same period of time. That is your magic number. Now, you can Google this, and you'll find the magic number for HubSpot. You'll find the magic number for some of these very high-growth companies. Of course, if you think through the equation a little bit, you want the number to be greater than 1. Then you're at least growing revenue profitably. Most of the marketplace companies that I've grown or been part of, especially the ones that went public, that number was greater than 5. So all of the money we were spending on sales and marketing would produce $1 in, $5 out, just in revenue growth. Like you're not counting the revenue retention, which is where NDR will come in, but just pure revenue growth, you want this number to be greater than 1. But certainly if you want to be differentiated from other marketplaces, you want it to be greater than 5. Companies like HubSpot, they're not there right now, but in their high growth periods of time, that number was greater than 10. So imagine working for a company where every dollar of sales and marketing effort you put into it, $10 of revenue came out in revenue growth over that same period of time. Huge opportunity. The last way to look at the business, and this was a newer one to me as I started to get more involved in PE and publicly traded companies, if you're interested in your company being acquired or going public, the financiers behind the scene are often looking at the rule of 40. And simply what they want to find out is they look at your growth rate added to your margin. And they want that number to be greater than 40. Right? Because look at Uber, look at Lyft, look at all of the companies that we've seen that have really struggled because they're not profitable. And most of them have always said, they followed the early Amazon model of we are not profitable because we're growing over profitability. Well, that is no longer good enough. So you don't have to be wildly profitable. That could be offset by wild growth. But you want to have a balanced approach, right? So NDR is going to show you that you're maintaining your customer base and you're growing revenue on top of that. Your magic number is going to show that your investment in sales and marketing is paying off and that's yielding the revenue growth. And then the rule of 40 is going to allow you to look at your business compared to your peers or the other people looking for money or looking for exits, and you can figure out, are we in a position where we're going to be interested to external partners? Right? Again, the last few companies that I've worked for, we've been above 40, but most of the marketplace companies that I talk to are below 40. And it's a hard space to be in sometimes. We'll certainly take questions at the end because I can't see any of you with the bright lights, so I'm going to keep going. Churn is the one thing that I spend probably the most time on. Spent a lot of time on this in my previous career, and certainly where I am now, because churn is a very interesting lever. All of us probably know, or if you don't know, it's 6 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to keep an existing customer. Right? So your current customers are way more valuable than those prospects you're chasing. Right? So that's one reason you want NDR to be positive. The other thing that I think often is overlooked is that churn is subtracted from your TAM. So often I have this total market, right? I've got 10,000 customers that I could possibly sell to, and I've got 5,000 of them as customers. So your sales team will say, oh, I got 5,000 left. I can sell to those 5,000 customers. If half of those 5,000 customers have over the last 10 years been customers of yours and they've churned, they're actually not included in your TAM, and you really only have 2,500 customers left to sell to. When you churn through a customer, it is highly likely you will never do business with them again. And that's part of the reason it's so expensive to hire new customers, is because your TAM is constantly shrinking. So you need to hold on to the customers that you have. Now, I put some points here. These are the blocking and tackling. I think these are the things that often we don't do as revenue leaders, certainly when times are uncertain, right? We just have to go back to the playbook and say, what are the basic things that we need to do? One of the things that I will tell you that has been most effective that I got from a peer, and I'm going to try and do a little bit of a survey, but how many of you talk to your customers at least once a month? All right, not as many hands as I would think. More of you need to talk to your customers on a fairly regular basis. How many of you that raised your hands talked to churned customers at least once a month? Great, I see 2 hands. This was the most powerful thing that changed churn for me in several companies. I was spending a ton of time talking to prospects. Then probably next, I was spending a decent amount of time talking to customers, because you want to know what customers want. And then one of my peers asked me, how many calls are you making to churn customers? I said, none. And they suggested that I give that a try. So I went to our retention team, and I said, every month, I want you to set up a call with a customer that you can't get to come back to our platform. And they're like, sure, well, whether you think you're going to sell them or better sales. And I said, I'm not even going to try and sell them. I just want to talk to them. And I actually learned by talking to these customers why they were churning. And guess what? It was a common reason. So what I would do is I would talk to these customers, find out the reasons that they were churning. I would go back to the business because often these were upsetting and easy things that we could fix, but were systemic issues that we didn't fix because we had such a great product, or because we were growing so quickly, or we had many excuses. And we went back and we started fixing these issues. When I started doing this, in 2 instances, we cut churn in half within the first year, which significantly changed the business. Just by going to the customers that were leaving us, asking them why they're leaving, and then getting our company to fix that internally. Expansion. Another great way to increase revenue is expansion. But I would caution us here is often we fall in the trap of expansion through price, constantly just raising our price for our products, or launching ancillary products. We've got to be very careful with new products, because if your core product is fantastic, which in the marketplace business usually it is because it's such a high yield, you're delivering a customer, you're delivering a lead, you're delivering a connection, all the other things you offer are going to be less valuable, and often when you go to rise price, they're going to churn. Because the customer doesn't find as much value in those as they do your core product. So the marketplaces globally that do this really well, like Trader UK, like Rightmove, you'll notice they do not have a lot of products. It's all in their packaging. So if they have some great new thing, they're going to push you up in packaging. They're not going to sell it to you as a separate product. So they're always going to try and give you more value when they ask for more price, as opposed to just selling you more things, which I think is incredibly important. New customer acquisition, right? This is the glitzy one. This is the one that you hire your sales team to do and bring in new customers. There's one glaring, obvious thing that's missing in many of these, and I would almost say that it would answer the question in the previous slide. Have a free product, or make sure you offer a free trial. If your product is good, give it to people for free, because then you can convert them to customers, especially in this uncertain time, right? They're really concerned about giving up money, about where they're spending their money, and it's not just on marketing. They're worried about payroll. They're worried about everything. They're worried about revenue coming in. Give your product to them for free. CarGurus has the largest dealer base of paying dealers of any marketplace in the US, and we're also the only ones that has a free product. And the customers that convert from free to paying convert at a much higher rate than trying to find a new prospect. So make sure you're giving your product away for free. The last one is that I would talk to you about this is make sure you understand your value prop and the customer needs. Often I find, especially when you're getting into selling into new customer segments and you're applying the old ways, or you're trying to sell a new product that you're launching, once we have such a great product, which again, I think why I love the classifieds and marketplace space is what we deliver is an exceptional amount of value to our customers, we then often think we know better than our customers. And I see this trap of going into new market segments and saying, oh, we know what they want. Or building new products and saying, we know what they want. You've really got to take the customer into consideration and really understand what is the value that you are delivering to those customers, and make sure that you're actually delivering something that they want. Because in many cases, you're not, and that's where new sales is struggling. It's the basic of product market fit, and we think that all our babies are beautiful. And I've been in so many conversations where the CEO, the head of product, the head of engineering would tell me that it's not selling because the sales team isn't doing a good job. And I like to remind them, if the product was that spectacular, you wouldn't need salespeople. So really focus on making sure you're finding that product market fit, and it should sell itself. So we have time for questions? Or do I have 4 minutes left, or is that, I've got 4 minutes left. Okay, we can take a few more minutes for questions because I know you didn't get through them all. So sorry. I thought I had to end at 5 minutes too, so I ran through that pretty quickly.
Please. So, one question at the moment. So, what was the primary driver of churn at your previous companies, if you're able to share that?
I'm able to share that. So we usually track churn in two ways, and I say we because I've done this across multiple companies, is you're looking at involuntary churn and voluntary churn, and you're looking at logo churn versus product churn. So voluntary versus involuntary. Voluntary churn is your customer just decides to leave you. Involuntary churn is your customer decides to leave you because you're increasing their price. They go through a contract renewal, you're increasing their price to a point that they don't want, and they leave the platform. The main driver in many marketplaces that I've worked for, the biggest source of churn, has been that second bucket. Of course, you want the outcome of that to be positive, so you may be driving a lot of churn through your renewal process, but it pays off at the end of the day. But usually, on the voluntary side, or on the logo churn versus the product churn, it was just poor product market fit. And often it was the salespeople overselling a product that the customer didn't need, and then it would churn. And that's something we got to be careful about too, because we've spent a lot of time in other marketplaces as market dynamics shift. You can lower price as quickly as you raise price, right? It's better to keep the customer at a lower price than it is to let them to churn. So sometimes if the customer's oversold or if the dynamics in the marketplace have changed significantly, you need to adjust price down. And usually companies are fairly scared to do that, and it causes higher churn, which is unnecessary churn, and you don't want those customers to leave.
So, I mean, America has a particularly large number of autos marketplaces. You know, how do you avoid the problem of simply, you know, the three big players, you know, hitting each other's prices and just chasing each other to the bottom?
That's interesting because the interesting dynamic in the US is pricing for the customer, right? So the dealers are paying more per lead each year across all the marketplaces.
Yeah.
So they're actually driving prices up. And I would say another interesting thing is that the marketplaces from a nuance perspective do very different things. Like Cox is going to lock you in with all of their tools, and they're very new focused, and they have great relationships with the OEMs, and they charge the most per lead. Cars.com is for shoppers that are at the top of the funnel, also very new focused, but they've got a ton of traffic. They're going to show you share of voice. They're probably next from a CPL perspective.
Yep.
And then CarGurus has won the consumer, and we're going to give more leads than anybody else. But often our leads are not only bottom of the funnel, but they're for less expensive cars and very used focused, where there's less margin. So we have the lowest cost per lead.
And do you actually focus the strategy in that direction? I mean, playing for the lower value cars, or is it a...
I would say, in the CarGurus example, and this is public information, it is the classic innovator's dilemma, where because we exposed price, right? Yeah. CarGurus' differentiation was our instant market value. Where are you getting the best deal? When you expose price to consumers, you know, to no one's surprise, what consumers do you get? Price-sensitive consumers that tend to look for low-value cars. So then we needed to go out into the marketplace and sell to dealers that had low-priced cars. Turns out at that time, Cox and Cars didn't even sell to those dealers. So we went into the bottom of the market where no one else was playing, provided a low-price solution, won the consumers, and then we just went up market.
What's the best way to monetize? Is it subscription or performance-based, some kind of lead model or bundling, and why?
Wow, that is a very complex question. So I'll put my economist hat on and says it depends. But looking at those options, I would say, for revenue stability, if you have the scale and you're going to be able to deliver fairly consistent volume to your customers, I would always go with subscription-based. Now, often there is some element of performance behind subscription. You know, Zillow does a really good job of having realtors compete in very specific zip codes. You have to buy a subscription for the whole year, but all year, all those other realtors are putting in a price that they're willing to pay for all that lead volume. And then when you go up for renewal, they'll just tell you the new price is X. And you're like, wow, that's really expensive. Well, you can still pay what you're paying, but you're going to move to fifth, because everyone else is willing to pay for your slot, and then it becomes on them, which I would say is fairly performance-based. But it really just depends on where you are. And like the TrueCar model or other models where it's transaction-based, you're always best at aligning incentives with the customer and doing it on a transaction basis, so you're not exploiting them or they're not exploiting you, and you're both aligned with getting the customer to make a transaction.
Okay, so I think we've got time for one last question. What was the compelling reason for free dealers to convert to paid? Was it just lead volume, or was it enhanced functionality, or something else?
I'm gonna answer the two parts of that really quickly. I mean, the most compelling reason free dealers converted is because they got to use the product and realized that it was good. The lever that we used to get them to pay was we made it much easier to transact with us. So in all the marketplaces that I've worked, either free is capped, free doesn't have specific functionality, and like Evernote, right? Evernote is a free version, but they know that people want to use it on multiple devices, so their free version only allows you to use it on one device. So they figured out, how do we get you to use it and try it and love it? But they know that one feature that you're going to jump to paying. In each marketplace I've worked for, you just got to figure out what is that feature, and in many cases, it's like an integration with their CRM. So at CarGurus, if you're free, you got to come to our portal to get all your leads. If you move to paying, we'll inject those leads right into your CRM, into your same workflow, and that was the biggest lever to get them to move.
And one very quick follow-up on that. Out of curiosity, as a European, I mean, CarGurus tried to take that model to Europe,
Yep.
and it failed in pretty much all the markets. It's still in the UK, but a relatively small player. Why do you think that model hasn't worked elsewhere?
I think it's the kind of the thing I mentioned earlier about thinking that your model is great and that it's going to apply to any customers. I think one of the things that we learned fairly on in Europe was that it was very new car driven, and that there wasn't a lot of inventory sitting on lots, right? Because there was just less space.
Yep.
So consumers expected in the car shopping process to configure a car and then wait for it to be delivered. We're in the United States, we're instant gratification. We want to shop, we want to click a button, we want to go to the dealership, we want to sit in the box for 4 hours, and we want to drive away with our car. Completely different model. So the way we were selling, the way we were attracting consumers didn't necessarily have the scale. And then I would say, tip your hat to the competitors there. Like Trader UK is a great example.
Yeah.
Trader is a company that I hold near and dear and respect with ton of admiration, because not only do they dominate the market, they provide a fantastic experience to both the consumer and the dealer. So they've just got lock-in. The dealers don't like paying how much they pay, but undeniably they will say they get the best service from Trader.
Brilliant.
So that's hard to compete against.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
Let me grab that.